More resignation news reportedly coming. A lot of other situations boiling around the world, but this Bo Bergdahl Army story, last week we see it come out that Obama has intentionally blown the cover of a CIA asset, and we'll be breaking down all the names and details with Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs coming up in the next segment. We see the report that he blows the cover of the CIA asset and is in hot water for that. And before we find out why this is all going on, Bo Bergdahl, who told members of his Army team, I'm going to go AWOL, which is clearly a cover, could be a cover, for him to then artificially defect to the Taliban to, quote, then infiltrate that group. And we know both groups, Taliban, Al-Qaeda, there's 2 or 3 different groups of Taliban, different sub-factions of Al-Qaeda, different sub-factions in the CIA, different sub-factions in the Army. This is what countries and intelligence agencies do. The whole thing stinks really bad. Then you've got a Twitter that appears to be his dad's, operating for years, that came out, and we'll put that tweet on screen. We have a Twitter account where his father is talking about there'll be great vengeance, there'll be great payback for every Afghan child that's been killed. And then his dad gets up on television and starts speaking in Farsi. Immediately when this started breaking Friday through Saturday, Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs was calling myself and others saying, look, this just doesn't hold water. I'd heard about this guy, he said years ago from people that were in his unit saying that something was, going on with him. And for those that don't know what sheep dipping is, you will stage your death, or you'll get out of the military, or they'll claim you failed at Special Forces training like Ed Snowden or Timothy McVeigh. And then you're put into clandestine operations, which is confirmed now with McVeigh and Snowden. That's not speculation. So when you see this MO, we ought to get Steve Pachinik to pop in for 10 minutes today or tomorrow on this. I was just thinking, he's saying that the Snowden situation is a double agent operation, and then now Snowden comes out and says, I was trained as a spy by the CIA and by others. So we have that report as well. So again, it becomes a larger diversion and a distraction and just a PR stunt by Obama to say, look, I'm bringing our boys home by releasing a whole bunch of top Taliban people out of Gitmo. So I'm not saying that it is a conspiracy yet, but it's definitely pointing in that direction. And we should never forget that this is the same administration that hands down, staged the release of the death of bin Laden. This is the administration that lied and said the Navy witnessed him being thrown overboard. Turns out that's not true. And faked the situation room photos and said they were watching live video feeds that didn't happen. I've interviewed the Navy SEALs families on air. They even know the name of the bin Laden lookalike double agent. And I don't have to go back into that whole story of why that was fake, meant to cover up the whole birth certificate story. But this has all the earmarks of a stunt. We're going to dissect it coming up. Then the aftermath of Bilderberg 2014 that was really important, and just a ton of other vital news today. Stay with us. We have some huge guests coming up this week as well. It's a big week. Stay with us. So much of what we see on the news concerning the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, MI6, different intelligence agencies, doesn't even have to do with the public. It is different agencies that are basically fighting with each other. So many times it turns out that that's really what's going on. And earlier last week, we had the Washington Times break the story that was then picked up by the other media. Obama insists on protecting intel sources days after blowing CIA agents cover, the head agent in Kabul, in Afghanistan. 3 days after the White House inadvertently blew the cover, yeah, right, of the CIA's top officer in Kabul, President Obama on Wednesday said his administration is committed to effective intelligence gathering and protecting sources and methods abroad. And again, not that this story in and of itself is that important unless you use it to learn how things really work. And a first approximation of this, looking at it this weekend, the Bo Bergdahl Army story, who's been in captivity for almost 5 years, supposedly. Looks like an infiltration operation where you purposefully claim you've defected to the Taliban. And then they don't trust you, they grab you, and then you're a quasi-prisoner. And then you act like you've got Stockholm syndrome and that you basically join them. And then you have the dad with his Twitter, reportedly, and it looks like it's his real Twitter. It's not verified, but it's been operating for years, saying, people will pay for the death of Afghan children, and growing a big beard and all the rest of it. The whole thing stinks to high heaven. The fact that Obama has him and his wife out there, they wouldn't trot some soldier's dad and mom out unless they absolutely knew who they were and trusted them. This is the same Obama ran the whole fake bin Laden death deal that's been proven to be a fraud, hands down, up one side and down the other. We should probably on the nightly news tonight, and then I'll air it tomorrow, recap the lies of the bin Laden raid, with the fact that they court-martialed a record number of people on the aircraft carrier. They said they never saw it. The Navy SEALs that have families who've been on the show, 2 different families, saying, no, we know the name of the bin Laden double look-alike who was killed at the compound, a CIA asset they set up. Turned out the CIA was running in that whole area the fake inoculation program. That was their cover. Again, ladies and gentlemen, this is ridiculous. You send Navy SEALs in to literally kill your own double asset bin Laden lookalike. And then you blow up their helicopter on the ground trying to get rid of them, the experimental helicopter. Then you bury the fake body on the ship, but there is no body. No one sees it. You put fake photos out claiming they're Pentagon leaked, fake Situation Room photos, fake video feeds that weren't real. Dr. Steve Pachinik, who is about the most high-level spy we've ever had on. I mean, he co-wrote the books with Tom Clancy. He obviously ran the Camp David Accords, helped found Delta Force with General Boykin, has run all sorts of clandestine operations, snuck into North Korea last year for us because he knows the North Koreans, basically got in and then admitted he was there. He said that was totally staged on my show in 2002 before it came out on CBS News that bin Laden had been treated at a U.S. military hospital in Dubai. He said that before it was in the news. And after he broke that on our show, also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, high level at the time till he resigned, he then came out and basically predicted even more. And he said this was staged then, that his body was on ice, that they would stage his death later, maybe even in a new administration. And then it all came true like he said. So that said, until about 45 after, we're joined by Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs, a combat veteran, of course, been written about in Esquire magazine for some of the big battles he was in that were covered by the late Michael Hastings, who I believe was probably a agency asset. We don't know which agency, but he had the whole cutout of that inside interagency battles, probably killed with a car bomb to cover that up. Told friends and family he was running for his life minutes before his car blew up. And the FBI was investigating him, said they weren't. So, again, Michael Hastings' friend, combat veteran of Afghanistan and Iraq, just immediately said things didn't fit Friday and Saturday. And I said, hold off, stand down. I don't want to be the first out front on this. I believe you. It is coming on the heels of this head CIA asset having their cover blown. That probably meant that this other guy's got cover blown. And so they said, okay, we've got to now stage you coming back. And I've seen this before where they will have a, quote, Al-Qaeda operative and their cover gets blown as really CIA or Defense Intelligence, and then they'll quietly release them and change their name. So this has been done over and over again. Now, I'm not saying Bo Bergdahl is a CIA asset or is a Defense Intelligence asset, and this is all staged. I'm saying all the pieces and the timing of this points at that. Now, sometimes things point at something, and that's not what it is. But a bunch of red flashing arrows, like it's a late night diner, are pointing into this thing, and we're just analyzing it. We don't claim we have all the answers, but we have a great pool of experts from, staff sergeants, who knew some of the people, talked to folks involved in the unit. He said that to me Saturday, and I said, well, I haven't seen that yet. Then Sunday, it was in CNN, and we'll put that article on screen, that his people in his unit are saying something was weird, looked staged to us, walked off into the desert. This is pretty crazy. And again, that would be the cover for him actually defecting or going AWOL and then getting captured. So we'll get Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs on this. Leanne McAdoo's been following this since she was following the CIA asset section leader in that area, having his cover blown. And again, when they claim this is done by accident, give me a break. When Bush did this, it was a huge deal and should be. Why is it now happening? Because there's interagency fighting going on, bare minimum. And it's not a good trade either. 4 Taliban commanders, or is it 5, for some army soldier. They wouldn't normally do this. Why are they doing it now? This will encourage the grabbing of more soldiers. And again, this may not be clandestine, may be a great guy. I'm not even saying that I believe that's happening. I'm saying things point towards that. We'd be crazy if we didn't bring it up. Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs, what's your take on this?
Well, Saturday, just like a lot of people, I woke up to the news that Bo Bergdahl was finally coming home. And I was sitting there thinking, just like most people, that gut reaction, wow, this is great. But as I started really going back and looking at a lot of the stuff that was going on, I saw my buddy Jason Leopold out of L.A. He said that he's known about Bergdahl coming back since last Saturday. He is on the White House email list. And the first email came out saying, Bo Bergdahl's coming back. And then he said he got another email that, a person, unknown was coming back. So for some reason, the White House went from saying him to then not saying his name again. So I found that interesting. But if you want, pull up that video of Bo's father talking to the president Saturday morning.
Assist you in all the aspects of your recovery to full health.
But most of all, I'm proud of how much you wanted to help the Afghan people and what you were willing to do to go to that length.
Father did an interview yesterday on CNN, and what he was talking about, and I just found it chilling. The whole interview, he's very calm and collective, but as soon as he talks about what his son's doing for Afghanistan, you see that vein pop up out of his head, and you see him get real teary-eyed and choked up. And I found that to be just very, unusual. A lot of the people were saying that his son, even before deployment, talked about, he said, hey, if this deployment is bogus, I will walk off the base and into the mountains of Pakistan.
You told me that. You have that article up on Infowars.com.
Well, when I got to Bob Bergdahl's account, the Twitter account, I saw that tweet, and I saw it right before it got deleted. He says, I'm still working to free all Guantanamo prisoners. God will repay for the death of every Afghan child. Amen. Well, Bo's father is supposed to be a devout Christian, so the fact that he misspells amen, I found that to be a little weird too as well. But immediately they took that tweet down, and I find that that in itself right there is a little shady too. Yesterday with that press release from his father, when he goes and talks about that, it just sent chills down my back. Now we know Obama released 5 Gitmo detainees for Bo's release. What does that mean? Well, the president's message to the Taliban and other enemies out there is America will pay any price to get someone out. I mean, these are bad things for our enemies to know, that 5 Gitmo detainees are equivalent to 1 American. Now, what if the Taliban kidnaps someone tomorrow? If that's a civilian, are we going to just forget about them because they're military? No. We're going to go after them. And when you put the price of an American, put the price on an American head like Sergeant Bo Bergdahl, you put prices on everyone's head. Now it's unsafe for all Americans all over the world now to be out.
Sure. Let me ask you this question, though, separately. On the heels of the CIA assets cover being blown, we now learn weeks before, that to me is a big connection to suddenly this guy's being sent back. What does this sound like to you? What's your gut tell you is going on here?
Yeah, when I had time to sit down and think about this, they're talking about how they blew a CIA operative's cover, and all of a sudden, Bo Bergdahl needed to be pulled out, of being captive because he was in danger. But he wasn't in danger for the entire 5 years. he was held captive. I mean, that doesn't make sense. The Haqqani network is one of the most vile, evil terrorist networks out there. They're called the Sopranos of Afghanistan. You know, these guys chop people's heads off, and he was fine for those 5 years, but now he's in danger? I don't get that.
Well, let's come back and continue to break this down and what this means for Obama with all the different resignations in his administration and the rest of it straight ahead with Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs. I'm Alex Jones. It's June 2nd on this Monday edition. Stay with us. Now, going back to Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs, who has friends from the Army who knew this guy, and they've turned him into this cause celeb. And you know what? He might have gone off in the desert and got grabbed by these guys. We need to go back to the original story of Bo Bergdahl. What do we know about that? I mean, how did he get supposedly captured by the Taliban? And why are his comrades saying that he was more of a deserter? That's the headline in CNN than this Taliban victim. What's really going on here? And why does his dad get all choked up when he talks about the Afghan people? I mean, that just sounds like a psyop to me.
Well, he was in a infantry unit out of Alaska, and when he joined the Army, a lot of the guys didn't like him because they said he didn't interact with people. He read books all the time, stayed to himself, practiced meditation. He would do curls with his saw. You know, he was just very dedicated to his cause at the time. And now we have two stories, and the first story is he had walked off the base and was then AWOL. Another story is that he was on a foot patrol and fell behind, and he actually fell behind to use the bathroom. He had, sat down to use the bathroom, and a Taliban guy grabbed him and, took him. And you can, if you read the Hastings article, it talks about, he's got some of the chatter in there on the Taliban. They were laughing, saying, oh, we've got an American. Let's make a video. Let's get it out to everyone and let them know that we have somebody. So there's two different stories, but I find it believable that he did walk off the base and desert. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, that's what his buddies are saying, and they could be wrong. It's just that, again, he didn't fit in with everybody, and just what you described there, it sounds more like an intelligence agency operative's MO than a soldier's MO. What do you think?
Well, the funny thing is about his father. He is a U.S. Postal Service worker and had been for 20-something years. The fact that he speaks Pashtun in a very perfect dialect, I don't know many people in Idaho who probably speak Pashtun, but I think it's kind of odd that this man speaks it to the T. I mean, just the way he sounded, the way he said everything was spot on from what I heard when I was in Afghanistan. So I think there's a little something behind him.
What was Bergdahl's special mission to help the Afghan people? I mean, what does that mean?
Well, from a lot of the emails that he was sending home, he said that, he was ashamed to be an American because of what he saw going on over there, and that he felt like he needed to help the Afghan people and get out there. So I'm thinking and then he's the one that gets captured. He's the one that gets captured. Yeah, sounds like a perfect person to infiltrate their network. I mean, maybe he is a hero, like his dad says, if he had the courage to get picked up on purpose to go into captivity. I mean, maybe the guy is a hero. We're just not getting it. Then the question is, why is Obama now revealing it? It's because his cover got blown by this section chief. Well, what's weird is when his dad talks yesterday, he goes, I'm proud of how much you wanted to help Afghan people, that you were willing to go to the length that you did to help them out. So is he confirming that his son did, in fact, walk off the base and go AWOL? That's what I find to be just everyone's stories right now. When you start putting all these pieces together, look at him right now. He's smiling, looking at the president. I just think there's something other than this whole happy, welcoming home story going on.
I was about to say, most families, they're not going to get them anywhere near Obama. The Navy SEAL families, you name it. I mean, they act like they know each other. I mean, this whole thing, the father needs to answer these questions because he's done some stuff that's unusual. You do unusual stuff under stress, but, I mean, I thought he was like a hillbilly with the beard and all that until he started speaking Pashtun. I tell you, Biggs, I want to find out from your other Army buddies what they think about this. I know you've already been talking to some of them. And when we come back, let's talk about that with Leanne McAdoo. And let's also open the phones up for active duty or former Army that know anything specifically. 800-259-9231. Do you know anything, or what's your gut tell you? 800-259-9231. I'm Alex Jones. This is Real Talk Radio, real issues, not mindless fluff. This is the thinking person's radio. I'm Alex Jones, Infowars.com. And again, ladies and gentlemen, everybody knows I don't like the military-industrial complex. I don't like what the CIA did in 47, taking over our government, making it secret. But at the same time, there are people like Tosh Plumley, famous CIA contractor who's a patriot and continues to expose bad stuff. I've had family that worked in the Army and CIA and places who were great patriots and who loved liberty. But it's the top-down system that is so incredibly corrupt. And when you've studied this for 20 years like I have or longer, you learn to recognize when a story doesn't wash. And by the way, I'm not the only one. Our listeners, Saturday and Sunday, when we had just little articles posted on Infowars.com with the mainstream story, and just little blurbs from AP and CNN and places, people are like, how dare you post this saying this is real, this is pure bull, and, you know, Jones, I'm getting sick of you towing the establishment line, and by the way, that shooting 2 weeks ago in California was fake. Listen, I know they stage stuff. I know a lot of stuff's fake. Sometimes things aren't fake. And I just don't say something's fake out of the gates. The bin Laden thing takes 2 hours to cover. We've done it. The videos have, 3-4 million views a piece on YouTube alone of my radio show and TV show breaking down why the bin Laden thing was fake. This looks like it's fake, but we don't know how it's fake, is my view. We're not getting 1/10 the story. This is propaganda for Obama. It's blowing up in his face, showing that they tried to spin something that was already bad. You can tell when they really stage something. They're all lined up. They're all ready. It's a unified message, like Sandy Hook or the bin Laden supposed raid killing. But in the case of other events, when it's all over the map and a train wreck, it's them trying to use a crisis and not let it go to waste, as the White House Chief of Staff, Rahm Emanuel, now Chicago mob boss, said. On the situation. We'll have Big start going to those calls at about 47 after or so at that segment, the next segment, and then that little segment at the start of the next hour. But let's go back to Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs, again looking at the Bo Bergdahl announcement, Obama, the CIA section chief's cover blown. We're just trying to find out exactly what's going on here, but the story doesn't add up, and his own members of his unit are saying that. Staff Sergeant Biggs, you've got a clip you want to play.
Yeah, I wanted everyone to see that clip from his parents talking to the president of the White House on Saturday. I just want to see what everyone thinks about how he reacts and how he's talking to the president, and listen to his dialect, how he's speaking Pashtun, and how it's so, perfect and just on point.
I'd like to say to Bo right now, who's having trouble speaking English, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Zayabayem. I'm your father, Bo. The people of Afghanistan, the same. Khalifa al-Thani.
I mean, what is you? He's bringing up the Afghanistan again. I mean, he is.
It sounds like his son's been trained to super deep cover for this mission all along to penetrate their network.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think he had to have been in contact with the Haqqani network as well, to keep up his dialect and to be able to keep speaking that way. I mean, he had to be doing some negotiations for a long time himself.
I don't know what you know, and of course, 5 years your son gone, you would learn how to do this stuff. But I mean, you told me that's one of the hardest languages to understand or speak correctly.
Yeah, I mean, when I was over there, I had to use Rosetta Stone, and when you're in the Army, they give you a free copy of that. You're able to go on and learn languages like that. So when I was over there, I was able to pick it up for a little bit of time, learn how to write a little bit as well. But once you get back and you don't have anybody to talk to, that goes away really fast. I mean, I don't know who he's talking to in Idaho to be able to keep that up at all. But also, I want to go to...
Absolutely. I mean, to copy a Texas accent properly, you need to live here years and years and years. It's the same deal. I mean, how does he in Idaho speak with a... You're saying that Pashtun accent sounds dead on or close?
Yeah, it's very close. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, I've heard a lot of Americans who are interpreters who learn the language, and they don't come off as comfortable and as well-versed as he does in that, in that interview with the president. And
he's doing it with the president on national television.
Yeah, smiling, patting each other on the back, having a good old time.
Do we have any callers yet on the board there, Staff Sergeant?
Yes, I see.
Okay, well, we'll just be ready to go to those after we get Leanne's take on this. Leanne McAdoo, what is your take on this? I know you've been researching this the last few days, and you have your perspective on it.
Well, it's all kind of throwing me off. I was celebrating my little brother's graduation when they announced this on Saturday, so I really didn't know who they were even speaking about. I just saw, the line there, POW had been released, and so I was just kind of watching it, watching Obama, and his demeanor, and just looking at it, thinking, wow, his dad. That's just someone you don't really ever see, this big bearded guy. And here I'm thinking he's probably, just some farmer or something or some big bearded patriot dude just, out there with Obama. And then he gets up and you can really see in his demeanor just the way that he was even interacting with Obama. And Obama says, I want the father to speak, and then if the mother has anything to add, we'll let that happen. And they didn't even listen to him. She spoke, and then he went up and speak, and you could see Obama's face, the way that he reacts to Bo Bergdahl's father speaking in Pashtun. He wasn't expecting that to happen, and then he addresses the Afghan people directly. And that's what, the son was there that he was so disappointed about, because he thought he was going to help the people of Afghanistan, and then he gets there and finds out that's not the case at all. So did his father at some point become a sympathizer with him as well? Or, clearly, he's got the beard.
Well, that is Stockholm Syndrome. This could just be Stockholm Syndrome, that more and more people, and Americans are primed for this now, that when they're under an oppressor, they tend to start worshiping the oppressor. And that explains the worship of our big, fat, out-of-control, evil government. That could be it, too. It could be he's deep cover to infiltrate the group.
Well, that was my first instinct. That was my very first instinct. I know, that's what you told me Saturday. Well, because I didn't know who they were speaking about, and then I just see him, the man, come out and speak Pashtun and say, thank you so much for everyone that's helped. And then I was like, man, that guy's deep cover. That's deep cover right there. That they're getting his kid out now, who had gone to such lengths to assimilate into this network, and then his father as well. That's to me, that's my first instinct.
Well, show that Breitbart article real quick, if you don't mind. And it's titled, Did the Obama White House Trade 5 Terrorists for Taliban Sympathizer? And it says, in 2010, the Taliban claimed that Sergeant Bo Bergdahl had converted to Islam and had taught them bomb-making techniques. Bergdahl had also changed his name to Abdullah. This is very comparable to the Tale of Sergeant Brody and the Homeland show on Showtime.
That's what, I'm glad you said that. I was thinking about that last night. That's what the angle we need to look at here, because I'm telling you, they have this narrative on all these shows like Homeland and cartoons and everywhere, that the vets are going to be the terrorists, that the vets have all turned to Taliban, they've all turned to Al-Qaeda, they're all going to attack you, which is ridiculous. So they have to manufacture it then in this narrative to make the troops and the Tea Party the new Al-Qaeda. I've been writing articles for 6 years about how they were going to claim white Al-Qaeda and claim this narrative, because we got some of their internal documents that we published, obviously. And then here we are, saying why we don't trust it. That's because our subconscious has all this data we've already covered in thousands of shows, and now it's bubbling out. Angle right there, Biggs. You just hit it.
Right, exactly. Well, we were speaking on Saturday, just watching this, and Biggs is like, well, the real story is the fact that we traded these 5 terrorists for this one soldier that's going to set an awful precedent. But less than 24 hours, usually the media would just say, well, Obama says this guy's a hero, case closed, let's move on. Less than 24 hours later, they are already, all these articles with all this backstory saying, did we just, rescue this guy who had defected anyway? And so they were immediately going with this different story. And so I was talking to Biggs, we've got the photos that surfaced of the first white suicide bomber, and how this was foreign policy, I believe, who's saying that the big fear is that Americans teaming up with al-Qaeda affiliated groups will return to the U.S. to conduct terrorist attacks. And so now they're kind of pulling in this whole story.
Well, I was talking to my buddy yesterday, Jason Leopold, and the FBI likes to call him the FOIA terrorist. And, I wanted to throw a few of these things by him as well. And one of the things he had mentioned was, he's like, remember that email you got from Hastings? And he said that the FBI was coming after him and were looking for him. And I go, yeah. He's like, I think this is what it was about, because if you remember, Hastings' last article was America's Last Prisoner of War, and it was about Bo Bergdahl at the time. And
wait, it's all coming together.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten you'd said that. You need to get your buddy on the show. Can you do that?
Possibly. I'll give him a call again today and see what he can do.
Well, let's do it tomorrow.
Yeah. But
this is, wait a minute. I forgot. Hastings did an article about this. You were just mentioning it. Oh my gosh. This really, oh my gosh. So what does your buddy think?
We all think this is connected now, with the death and all that as well. He honestly thinks that the FBI was after him because of this, and shortly after his death, he says, the FBI released a statement saying we have nothing to do with this. But after many FOIA attempts and all that, it's come to light that the FBI was looking into him because of his interest in Bo Bergdahl, and they found it very disturbing, and they called that controversial journalism.
That's right, and you talked about this months ago on the show. So here we are talking about Bo Bergdahl and this months ago in association with Hastings' death, and we know the FBI visited his house, or we know the Feds showed up. We know his wife, who you went to the funeral, who you knew, said that she was mad and upset. Then she goes on CNN with Piers Morgan and says everything's wonderful, like a Stepford wife. This is really starting to smell.
It's coming full circle.
And she was the head assistant to the National Security Council. That's the top of the pyramid. That's the top of the black box government. That's who runs Homeland Security. That's who runs the dictatorship. That's it.
This whole story stinks. I don't believe a lick of it. It's another...
Well, it's like you said, Hastings would be in bombs and missiles blowing up in huge battles with you, and he was just totally relaxed and smiling. You never saw other journalists that acted like that. And, you've said on record you think Hastings was some type of operative.
He was down in there. And another thing, though, as well, though, is he thought that, for a while, he thought his wife was almost kind of sent there as a mole, too,
well, of course, spies are going to have spies on each other. This is just out of control. We're going to go to break. We're going to come back with your phone calls directly, straight ahead. We're going to go right to your calls to give your take on this in 2 segments. Then we've got another guest coming up and a bunch of other news. But Infowars.com and our team is hot on the trail of finding out the truth. It doesn't add up what Obama is telling us. I know that's hard to believe. He would never lie to us.
Well, I was talking about this thing with a couple of my friends today, and one of the guys actually went to that base that the guy left from. And the guy, when he was there, the guys that were there, the troops that were there were telling him about how the guy walked up, laid his gear down at the gate, and walked out. So you were wondering about whether this story is actual or not. Yeah. The guy walked up, laid his gear down, and walked away. He told him, I'm going home. And then the first sergeant there came up to the guys and said, why did you let him leave? And they were like, well, he's a grown man. What are we going to do, shoot him? So, the story where the story's true about he walked up and walked out.
Wow. Any other tidbits or any other questions you'd like to ask this fellow, Biggs?
No, not at all.
Well, that's what they're saying. People in the unit are saying on CNN. So this is blowing up in Obama's face. Caller, Mark in Afghanistan, what does your gut tell you is going on? Did your buddies that were at this base, did they have any idea what was really going on, more than just saying that it looked like he went AWOL?
No, it this guy just flipped out the way that he done out here. You have one guy that flipped out and went and shot a bunch of people up. You have this guy that walked away. You have people out here capping themselves. I've heard soldiers talking about other soldiers capping themselves. They're kind of like, well, why? For people that have been out. I've been out doing jobs. I'm an employee of the military-industrial complex, if you will, and I've been out where base has been attacked. You know, and it's, I don't know, I just didn't get rattled like some people do, I guess, but some people can't handle it. But why they do what they do, I don't know. Nobody really.
Mark, very interesting information. Thank you so much. Joe in Connecticut, Army vet, what's your take on this?
Hi, Alex. You know, one of the first things that I wondered, because I mean, I've been following this story since the beginning when he did walk away from the base and Soldier flipped out and went crazy, I was wondering how he got off, but he wasn't captured by the Taliban. Sergeant Biggs touched on this. Like, the Taliban wouldn't keep him alive for 5 years. Unless he assimilated into them. They would look at him as the infidel, less than nothing, and immediately dispatch him. I mean, they wouldn't keep him alive for 5 years, but I find the timing of it so funny because it just totally takes the heat off the VA scandal and everything else. Like,
bingo! It totally changes the subject off the VA. Oh man, I tell you, these callers really are putting the pieces together.
I mean, one of the things though too, when I was in Iraq, I remember watching the video of one of the soldiers having his head sawed off. I mean, that is a chilling image that will never leave my mind. And the last thing I would ever do was walk off of a base because I know in the back of my head that I could get my head chopped off. I know if I fell behind in a ruck march, I could get my head chopped off. You know,
well, my cousin was telling me about how
off of a base is because you know you have nothing to fear. That's another scary thing is he walked off the base and didn't even think, all right, I'm gonna get my head chopped off. The Haqqani network is known as the Sopranos of Afghanistan. I mean, these are bad guys. They run. Well,
I was about to say, my cousin was giving backup to these medevac helicopters, but there are all these burned kids on a road, and when they got there, they'd burn their own kids up, and then they came out with bombs to try to blow them up, but they'd already figured it out and landed their helicopters further away. But I mean, that's the total brainwashing we're talking about here. Amazing. Thank you, Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs. Thank you, Joe in Connecticut. Yeah, this diverts off. I guess it's the new Malaysian plane story from the VA scandal that was absolutely exposing them. Chris, Sean, and Billy, your calls are coming up. Stay with us. Oh, and then Pachenik. Pachenik's coming up, folks. Pachenik wants to chime in.
Visit
8 after next hour. Then we've got other people coming up. The last article written by, and he had more articles coming out. Michael Hastings was on this. Notice we have one of his good buddies, Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs, working for InfoWars. He's been saying these are connected for a long time since he died. I don't know, 6-8 months ago, however long ago it was, maybe a year. Time flies. How long has Hastings been dead now, Joe?
It'll be a year, June 18th, so we're coming right up on it right now.
So almost a year. And I mean, we got to go back to all those shows where you mentioned it might have been the Bo Bergdahl case. I remember rolling my eyes. What's a POW have to do with it? I mean, this is really getting serious now, folks. And as usual, we're right on top of what's going on. We just haven't figured it out yet because we're always in the middle of it to begin with. But Leanne McAdoo's riding shotgun. Steve Pachenik's coming up to give his take. And Leanne and Joe can have a roundtable discussion with callers. Chris in Nevada, Army and law enforcement vet. What is your take on this whole story?
All right, Alex, thank you for this provocative, truth-based journalism that you're doing this morning. And hats off to Sergeant Biggs for his service. My apologies.
Thank you.
That's all right, brother. What do you think's going on here?
Couple of factoids. One, whenever this purported father, Robert Bergdahl, is making his announcement and the wife is speaking, look at him in the background. Observe. He has a very pronounced closing of his right eye, leaving the left eye open specifically, almost like a wink and a nod signal to somebody. Don't know who, but it's very obvious he's communicating in some sort of fashion to alert someone.
It's just like in the show Homeland, how Sergeant Brody does the same thing as finger tappings when he was sending the videos back home when he was being held captive. It's the same thing. I think he's kind of sending some kind of code over that video doing that.
Absolutely. Also, when you look at Hagel's coming out and trying to claim that capitulation and negotiation with terrorists is merely hostage negotiation, it speaks to the lies that they're trying to fabricate in this rhetoric-based story, followed by Susan Rice's coming forward, him hauling around, stuttering, her lack of credibility based upon her lies perpetrated in the Benghazi scam with Hillary Clinton just really have destroyed any pretense of credibility she may have ever had, and she seems to be a agent of Valerie Jarrett in the White House, the real talking hand for the puppet Obama. But these are really things that fly in the face, and like you say, his perfect speaking of Pashtun really just defied any concept of normality for an American unless they have absolutely been schooled in that particular language for a lengthy time.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. I mean, he's definitely...
And that leans towards him being an infiltrator for some agency, not actually being a double or going over to the Afghans. And so in my gut, that tells me this is part of a whole new rollout that, oh, look, the Tea Party and the soldiers are Al-Qaeda, which we see them actually trying to promote right now in the news, flipping Homeland Security onto the American people. Your take on that, Chris, and then Joe Biggs.
Agent provocateur masked as a jihadi terrorist in truth.
That's what I think. Well, that caller really says it well. Agent provocateur masked as a jihadi terrorist. Joe Biggs?
Well, one of the other things, though, that Lee and I spoke about yesterday or the day before was that maybe this is really all about the father. Maybe he's the one who is the actual, the operative and did something, and the son had to go in almost as, what was it we were saying yesterday? Remember that we were saying that we were thinking that the father was the one who was actually working for the CIA, and he had done something. Because you could see when he's talking to the president, he has that snarl look, almost kind of like, He had to negotiate to get his son.
Well, bottom line, they're covering something up, and this is distracting from the VA scandal, and I don't believe a word of it. And now we remember Hastings was hot on the trail of this. I mean, this is big. We'll be right back, and we'll get more from Leanne McAdoo and Steve Puchenik and Joe Biggs. Stay with us. Popping in on very short notice is Dr. Steve Puchenik, former head of psychological operations for the State Department, co-author with Tom Clancy, and kind of a master, a negotiator in his own right. And listen, I don't know his take on this Bo Bergdahl Army report. I just know that when it all happened, I went, haven't I heard that before? And then it was the story Hastings was working on. He'd already done one when his car got blown up out in California. And then the wife was getting threatened and everything. And then she goes on TV and says everything's fine. She's the head, minion at the National Security Council. Doesn't get any more high level than that. I mean, in those meetings with like 8 people, she's in there. I think both of them have the cutouts of spies of some agency. And Biggs knew him. Esquire articles in serious combat. He said all of their media would basically freak out. Biggs just loved it, was smiling and enjoying, rockets falling all around him. Biggs was saying that about Hastings, Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs, who works for Infowars.com. And now you have Bo Bergdahl and his dad, if you just joined us, his own buddies saying, no, he walked off the base, he went AWOL. Well, Biggs was telling me that days ago when this first broke, and I said, I can't find that. We're not going to go with that. Well, now it came out what Biggs said. Biggs has friends that were in the unit with him. And we've had contractors calling in saying, no. I mean, we know people on the base, same thing happened. He left. He said he was going. Same thing CNN's reporting. So there's a lot of issues here. I want Leanne McAdoo to be able to ask some questions. And I also want to get Joe Biggs to be able to ask some and kind of recap this. But just briefly, because I appreciate you popping in on short notice. You were just on the Sunday show. Dr. Steve Puchenik, what do you know about this? Because sometimes you know what happened. Or what is your take on it? Are we wrong to think this doesn't make sense with the CIA boss in Kabul getting his cover blown by Obama 2 weeks ago, and then now this happens? Is this guy a deep cover infiltrator into the Taliban, into the Haqqani network? Dr. Puchenik, what do you know?
Well, what I know is I'm going to give you a very special, unusual story that will show you the hypocrisy and inconsistency of this administration. 1 month ago, I was served a subpoena by the FBI on behalf of the U.S. Attorney of the Southern District of Florida by the name of Brian Fraser at the behest of the Justice Department, Eric Holder, and at the behest of Cecilia Altornaga, United States Supreme Court District Judge, requesting my presence and the potential indictment for having non-negotiated against terrorists 35 years ago as a U.S. military officer and Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, and I was brought in on charges of criminal charges for doing exactly the opposite and being consistent with our policy of no negotiation with the Red Brigade terrorists. And as a result, Aldo Moro, the Prime Minister of Italy, died. 35 years later, the State Department and the Justice Department, under the orders of Obama, has ordered me to appear before the court just 1 week ago, May 27th, 2014, at 10 a.m., in front of Brian Fraser, in front of an Italian prosecutor, at the behest of the Italian prosecutor, with the overlying notion that I will be committed for criminal indictment if I don't reveal what I had done in saving Italy and refusing to negotiate with terrorists. So what this shows, and what this just happened to me, and you're the only one to know now, the case number is here. It's 14MC21380 Altunaga. The judge was Altunaga. The Attorney General was Brian Fraser. And I was brought up on charges that I potentially have killed a Prime Minister because I refused to negotiate in a time of war with Aldo Moro, with his Red Brigade. I was a U.S. military officer in combat, and I was a Deputy Assistant Secretary under Jimmy Carter, and for the very opposite reasons that this president, who's been a total hypocrite and a total incompetent, along with Eric Holder and the U.S. military, they have negotiated with a terrorist, allowed a deserter, this is a deserter, this is not an infiltrator, to leave his post. He should have been jailed, stockaded, and incarcerated. And he is not a prisoner of war. He is a deserter. He should have been tried. I, in turn, have been tried for saving my country, saving Italy, and I've had to pay $20,000 to a lawyer just to show up to explain why I did.
By the way, Dr. Pachinik, I've got to interrupt you, and we'll go to our guest at 33 after. This is too important. But for people that don't know, Dr. Pachinik will never talk about this on air, but I've gone and checked into him over the years. It's in the London Independent, the BBC, and Le Figaro in France, and the biggest papers in Italy, where they say Dr. Steve Pachinik killed the Prime Minister by manipulating the Red Brigade and not negotiating, and then they killed him, which is crazy because how is not negotiating killing him when they're the ones that killed him? So that's in the papers 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 5 years ago. I mean, you can look up Dr. Steve Pachinik, and that's pretty much what you get on him. I mean, you know, running those operations with the Army and others. And, of course, he helped found Delta Force with General Boykin, who's also a listener of the show. And what I can't believe here is we get him on about this, and he drops this bombshell. You didn't tell us that, Dr. Pachinik. No, was it sealed? What happened in the court?
Is it because I couldn't say a word to you or anybody else. But since I appeared on May 27th in front of a prosecutor who was flown over from Italy, we had an interpreter. This is all American tax dollars. Plus, we had Brian Fraser sitting there. I had to hire a lawyer for $20,000.
But what I want to say, was this under a national security order? Because I don't want to violate one of those.
No, it's not under national security order. As a matter of fact, this is a totally illegal procedure because they brought in a former military officer in a civilian court, and they didn't even know I was a military officer at the time because I was a Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for counterterrorism and management. And so what happened is the military, the CIA, our Justice Department, State Department completely abandoned me as a former officer of the military, and now they're saying that they never leave anybody behind. It's an absolute lie. General Dempsey should resign. Hagel should resign. The President of the United States should be impeached for violation of constitutional orders and the fact that he has committed crimes. This person that they exchanged prisoners for was a deserter. I was a principal hostage negotiator and created that no negotiation hostage.
By the way, you're on record as the head psychiatrist over the PSYOP to be able to get the Camp David Accords as well.
I was the Assistant Secretary of State, one of the first. I had just saved over 500 hostages in Hanafi Muslim. I was asked by Secretary of State Cyrus Vance at the behest of Jimmy Carter and at the behest of Warren Christopher to go over to Italy. It was Prime Minister Cossiga. He was the Interior Minister.
Let me ask you a question. Are they going after you now because what you're saying on this show? Because I know they're purging a lot of people right now.
This was before before.
No, I know this happened a long time ago, but they're going to use. Why are they coming after you now? Is what I'm saying.
I have no idea, because they believe that as a result of my actions of no negotiation with the terrorists, which is exactly what we've been doing our entire life, where I've saved countless thousands of Italians, I saved the country of Italy from being totally devalued and destabilized. They are now going.
Yeah, for those that don't know, the communists were going to take Italy over at that point, and you are credited with stopping it.
And the communists, the PCI under Berlinger, refused to support the Red Brigade. So what you have is a situation where the president abandoned a soldier like me. The military, I had requested that our military help me. They abandoned me. The CIA abandoned me. You talk about justice abandoned me. You're talking about State Department, Kerry. And in contrast, they're telling you how great they are in a situation where you have a deserter and a man who didn't serve our country and who became an ally of the Al-Qaeda unit or the
I know, and they're spinning it. They're spinning it, and his dad speaks perfect Farsi. Joe Biggs, Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs, says none of this smells right to him. Joe, Leanne McAdoo, do you have any questions for Dr. Pachinik?
Well,
Leanne? Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, one of the things I wanted to ask, though, was, how many American lives do you think are going to be endangered now by us negotiating with terrorists now?
My answer, let me just say this to Dr. Pachinik, my answer is every U.S. officer, every U.S. non-commissioned individual, and every covert operative from 15 different intelligence units, including the CIA, the NSA, the NGA, and almost every American who's out there serving our country.
It's just unbelievable. I mean, like you said, the president should be impeached on this. I mean, this is just...
What is Obama doing? It seems like he's going crazy.
Well, I don't know if he's going crazy, but he's completely incompetent. From the Benghazi issue to the Osama bin Laden, to Newtown, to the Santa Barbara, to the fact that he has no idea of what he's doing. He is incompetent. In any situation, in any government, I've served 5 different presidents and continue to work with our Defense Department. I have never seen such incompetency. It has nothing to do with the Democrat, Republican, or whether he's black or white. The man has never had any experience. He's never managed the system, and he has no idea of what our history is.
He's also got a bunch of foundation heads who've never even been in the military, and I'm not putting them down that they're women, but it is a bunch of women, that he's got running the State Department and everything, who just want to have, it seems crazy.
Well, there's no excuse for John Kerry, who's a senator and was a combat veteran in Vietnam, not to know our policy and to have accepted this. There's absolutely no excuse for Chuck Hagel, whom I supported as Secretary of Defense, to allow himself and allow General Dempsey to accept this notion that we had a soldier in need. He was not a soldier. The minute you walk off the base, you are a deserter. That is a criminal offense. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. His mental health is a problem. That's an issue with all my hostages, but we deal with it. But we never go in on an issue of a deserter or a person who went AWOL. So this is not a soldier we left behind.
Okay, let me stop right there. We're going to skip this. We're going to skip this network break. Let's just skip the network break. I want to bring Leanne McAdoo in, who's been holding patiently in the wings. She was hopping up and down Saturday about this. I wasn't really paying attention to it. I'm glad she raised it to my attention, and that Biggs did as well. Leanne, what are your questions or comments for Dr. Pachinik?
Well, it kind of seems like they're turning against Obama, almost setting him up for impeachment at this point. Like they're done using him to create chaos, as he's done a very good job of creating chaos. But now they immediately, less than 24 hours, threw him under the bus. So it's almost like they're setting him up for something. But what I'm curious about is why these particular terrorists were released from Gitmo, because they're part of a different network. Now, obviously, we need to do a little bit more research. We'll have this for the nightly news. But there were other Taliban leaders that were part of the network that was holding Bergdahl that they could have negotiated for. So why these particular guys? And
yeah, we need to look at those people closely.
His father, working to negotiate for these guys.
His dad doesn't act like a postman. That's all I'm saying. Dr. Pachinik?
Well, I think you asked a brilliant question. First of all, the people who really held, as I understood, Bergdahl were not part of the Al-Qaeda group. They were Haqqani. Haqqani is a spin-off of the CIA and the Pakistani ISI. And And we, ironically, have been working with them, or the U.S. government's been working with Haqqani for a long time. So this administration had a very good idea of what was happening to Bergdahl for a long time. But your point about releasing these terrorists who are not part of the Haqqani, they are real old-line killers and very professional killers who've killed thousands of Shiites. And when they go out again, they will kill again. There's no issue that you release a terrorist and you get a promise from Qatar that they will be fine. Qatar is a place where, you can buy and sell anything. It's like Casablanca. But
well, let me raise this to Dr. Pachenik.
But in Qatar, though, that's a spot where they send soldiers for mid-tour leave. So you're going to have soldiers in Qatar, and you're going to have these 5 terrorists who hate America running around out there having a field day.
Correct.
And then how can we guarantee that this government can even, keep dibs on these guys? I mean,
let me throw this out. Well, they may have been turned or something, but the point is, we don't know that, or we can get Pachenik's take on it. Here's my issue. We're seeing a public reset with Libya, Syria, and all these other proxy wars to try to put al-Qaeda and jihadis out of Saudi Arabia in charge all over the Middle East to destabilize things further, overthrow more stable governments. I know Pachenik was actually arrested by Assad's dad, so he's not a big fan of him, but I want to get his take on this. This looks like a public reset to me with al-Qaeda affiliated groups. I understand the Haqqani group goes back to 79 as Zbigniew Brzezinski and the administration you were first in, but expand on that. Dr. Pachenik, does this feed into the reset I see happening with al-Qaeda?
Well, what's happening is al-Qaeda is becoming stronger and stronger, and Obama can't admit that, and that was the issue with Benghazi. What happened in Benghazi was that we didn't have really an embassy there. We had a house where we were interrogating the terrorists and basically shipping guns into Syria, which is what we're doing again. We have no policy, and I think what the person said correctly is we're not imploding the president. The president is imploding himself. He has no control of what's going on. The CIA has no real intelligence. They're shipping guns into the system, and they're increasing the volatility of the area by really incompetency. And what's happening now is we have to probably go in at some point in order to control it. But right now we have CIA operatives in Jordan who are determining which terrorists can go in there and who are moderate, which is absolutely absurd. Once you're a terrorist, you're a terrorist. There is no such thing as a moderate or extreme terrorist. If you're willing to use violence, you're willing to use violence. What you're seeing now is the absence of intelligence, competency, and a historical sense of what's happened to our country, and a future sense of where we should be going. It's as simple as that. We have an incompetent president, an incompetent Secretary of State, and an incompetent Secretary of Defense.
Well, I mean, they're clearly going with the order out of chaos model, but there's not even order they're taking out of the chaos. And that's what I guess the British intelligence head said a few months ago, was that they've never seen such disjointed lack of a message. And I think it's because the military-industrial complex interest and the big banks that own it, they just want more conflict. So I guess in the final equation, they do know what they're doing, Dr. Pachenik.
Not really. What's happening is, even though the military-industrial complex exists, what's really happening is we're getting a escalation of chaos, and we're getting what we're not looking at, quite frankly, my friend, is in China. And China is becoming more and more of a aggravation on our Asian front, and they're engaging themselves with Vietnam, the Philippines, and
let me ask you that, Dr. Pachenik, because you raise it. I know you've been to North Korea, you name it, and worked with the South Korean government and worked with the Japanese government. Expanding on that, and you reported last year live for us there. You were a few years ago on, saying watch China, and I kind of halfway rolled my eyes because they're already taking us over economically. Why on earth would they want to mess with Japan? Now they're saying we'll take islands of Japan, we'll take islands of the Philippines. They're now threatening to basically invade Vietnam. I mean, what's going on in China that's got them this aggressive when historically they've not acted like this?
China has always watched our leaders. When it worked with Nixon, it was very much afraid of him. When they had to deal with Bush Sr., they were very much afraid of him. When we have a strong leader, they pull back. When you have a weak leader, you have people like Putin who will annex Crimea, and you will have the Chinese leadership say, okay, now we will go into the Spratly Islands. The reason they're going into that area where we have a national interest or a world strategic interest is because it's oil. It's oil and gas, which Vietnam, the Philippines, Indonesia, Taiwan claim. It's been a claim for 20 years, but now that they see we have an incompetent president who should really resign or be impeached, they will move forward because they know nothing can happen. And CINCPAC cannot do very much about it at this point. All they can act is as negotiators.
Yeah, for those that don't know, the Chinese have been with arms taking over oil rigs and stuff already. So,
correct.
I mean, this is really escalating fast.
Correct. And at the same time, we're incredibly escalating into a chaotic state in the Middle East. In short, we have a president who doesn't belong there, who has no idea what he's doing. We have a national security advisor who has already failed in Libya, lied to the public in Benghazi, and is really not qualified to make any statements. We have a Secretary of State who's totally incompetent.
Well, here's my final question then, Dr. Pachinik.
To global warming and has no idea what he's doing. And we have Hagel, who's done absolutely nothing. In short, we do not have a government, but we're paying a lot of money for incompetency.
Right.
Leanne McAdoo, Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs, final questions for Dr. Pachinik or final statements?
Well, I think, for me personally, I feel like the globalists, they're done with Obama. I mean, I really feel like he has created so much chaos, and now with just the media kind of turning on him and not just accepting the story, this guy's a hero, let's move on. This is big, and the fact that he did all of this without going through the proper 30-day, you got to notify Congress, change that in the NDAA in December, made that to where he can kind of fast track it. So this whole thing is it's just very fishy. And
I agree, but don't think the networks behind Obama are going to not give up power. They could stage a false flag and try to use that to get their butt out of the fire. Right. Biggs, any other comments? Because I want to get Pachinik's take on a false flag.
Oh, I'm just curious as to whether or not they're going to somehow spin this to make him a hero, or in fact, are they going to actually punish him as a deserter like he should be?
They're going to spin him as a hero, but the irony, what you just brought out is an excellent point. The more they make him a hero, I can guarantee you from his own personal dynamics, and I've dealt with a lot of hostages who were not heroes, none of whom was as treasonous as this gentleman was, he will commit suicide at some point. There's no question about it, because he knows very well he was treasonous, he was AWOL, and he consorted with the enemy. I've never met a hostage who could not speak English after years of being incarcerated with their terrorists. I've never seen that. And what it means, in fact, is that he became one of them. They never tortured him. They never harmed him. He knows that. He admitted it.
Yeah, they chop people's heads off all the time, but he's left unscathed.
Right.
He's left unscathed. And the first words that are, words of Arabic and then Pashtun, and the inability to speak English tells me that he went completely to the other side willingly.
And by the way, his dad knows that, because he said, you need to, like a diver coming up too quick, you could end up dying. So I guess the Army doctors are telling him that, Dr. Pachinik?
Well, what's happening is his dad basically intimidated Obama and the administration, because what happened is this man should never have been recruited into the Army. This was a very sweet boy. He was an ex-ballet dancer, dancing in the Nutcracker Suite, and he was a free spirit who grew up in a cabin lodge with no phones, nothing else. His father was kind of a hippie, and that's all fine. When he went to the recruiter told him, no, we in the Army are basically like a Peace Corps, but we have guns. Give me a break. And this guy ended up to be a machine gunner. I mean, this was...
Yeah, he was a saw gunner.
The military is really totally embarrassed and should be embarrassed. And
Dr. Pachinik, we're out of time. Thank you for the short notice. StevePachinik.com. Thank you, Leanne McAdoo, Joe Biggs. We'll have more. Stay with us.
We're on the march.
Rappaport's
the
coming up.
On the
I'm Alex
run.
Jones. Stay with us.
Alex Jones and the GCN Radio Network.
John, I want to go to a few calls from Brandon and Sean and then give you the floor. In fact, I may even let you just take over the last 30 minutes to really get into whatever you want, and may just step away. Not even because of time. Wild horses couldn't drag me away, but I'm getting you primed to maybe even send you some better equipment and have you host the show sometimes, just like the great David Knight does, who's out of the country with Josh Owens coming back from Bilderberg today in Copenhagen. But give us your brief take on, not too brief, on the Bo Bergdahl story, why it doesn't smell good to me. I want to see if it doesn't smell good to you. And then we're going to go to Brandon and Sean and then move on to other issues.
Thanks, Alex. Absolutely. Well, I would say three things quickly. One is an operation like this to bring back this guy is aimed at demoralizing U.S. soldiers. The entire, rank and file. That's number one. That's
exactly. How do you give focus to a traitor and someone who went and joined other people, and then hold that up? It's meant to make us all feel bad. See, I hadn't gone with that angle. You hit it. Go ahead. Expand on that.
Right. I mean, that's the idea. The guy is AWOL, he deserts, whatever. And all of a sudden, this tremendous deal is made to return these Taliban chiefs in return, for this guy. And so what do the soldiers start thinking? Well, what are we doing over here in Afghanistan? We're dying, we're getting wounded, we're serving multiple tours to capture and kill these Taliban people. And all of a sudden, a few of the major ones are free. And this guy who walked away, U.S. soldier, he's returned to the United States. So that immediately puts a total cold blanket on the whole rank and file of the U.S. Army. And then number two, of course, it distracts everybody from the enormous VA scandal, the enormous and growing VA scandal that we haven't even begun to scratch the surface on, believe me. I mean, as huge as the implications are so far, that's nothing to compare to what's going to be dug up on this by people that are really looking. So this glosses all of that over. Oh, the commander-in-chief did a great thing, and this and that, and it's promoted by all the talking points from the White House on the Sunday talk shows, etc. And then the final and third thing that I would say, and yes, this is speculation, but who knows? Maybe this guy, this U.S. soldier that was just returned, suppose, for example, he was actually getting ready to talk in public. Not because somebody had brainwashed him. Who knows? I don't know who this guy actually is. But just suppose that he wants to go public and talk about what's happened in the war over there. And the U.S. intelligence community got wind of it. Wouldn't that be incredible?
And they say to the Akani network, you grab him, you give him back, we'll give you who you want. Now they have him locked down at a hospital.
Exactly. And never to be seen again. Boom. End of story. Could very well be.
I think we've hit all the angles. on that. Let's take a call from Brandon and then Sean. Brandon is active Army. Thank you for holding. Brandon, what's your take on this whole thing?
Yeah, I think we need to go back to the difference in stories between whether or not this guy walked off the fob or whether or not he fell behind on a patrol. If he walked off that fob, the soldiers around him would have, say he just dropped all his gear and his weapon. His platoon sergeant would have had to check that back in, his TA-50 and his weapon. Now, I think that we have to look at that first. I mean, there's a paper trail there. There's always a paper trail whenever...
So you're saying the hobbits at the base, as they're called, would have actually checked all that and had a record. Well, that's what CNN is saying, is that, oh my gosh, people at the base are saying he walked off. But there'd be proof.
Right. So, another thing, I don't see how he could have possibly fell behind on a patrol. Any squad leader worth his salt's never going to let anybody outside. I mean, accountability is a huge thing in the military. I'm just not buying it. I think it's more likely...
We'll continue. I was interrupting you. Going back to this forward base and describing how security works on those.
Well, there's... The only way he could have walked off that fob was if he was on an ECP, which is the entry control point. There would have been several people seen him do it. Yeah, they could have been told to lie or whatever about it, but most of the time they don't cover all their bases. There's going to be a paper trail, and if he fell behind on a patrol and got picked up out in the middle of nowhere, then his weapon and TA-50 would be missing, which TA-50 is what, your gear you carry. So I'm hearing two different stories on that, and I think if we get to the bottom of that, we'll find out a lot more about what this guy really is. Personally, I think he was a traitor to begin with.
What do other people around you think?
Same thing. That's the conclusion that we've pretty much all come to. I don't know anybody that knows him personally, but it's just not... It's not passing the smell test with any of us.
Why would Obama then do this and release 5 of these really bad guys, and then at the same time build this guy up like a hero? I mean, doesn't Obama know that'll blow up in his face? He just doesn't care.
I don't think he cares. I think he's just helping his buddies out. That's it, bottom line.
Very interesting. I appreciate your call. Let's talk to Sean in Wyoming. Sean, go ahead. You're on the air.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. I haven't talked to you in a while. I'm the fellow who worked with the Reagan National Advance Team for the campaign in 80 with the Secret Service and so forth. And I've been up here in Wyoming for 36 years, and I want to throw some more food for thought. I think you basically, we've got all the pieces there's been some tremendous points, and they all have validity. But what I've been up in Wyoming for 36 years, and I know the people and the different political factions in Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho like the back of my hand. And what struck me most telling is the fact when they wheeled these folks out with Obama the other day, and then when they flew back into Boise and they had that press conference, there's all kinds of different factions in Idaho, as you might know. There's unlike anything in Montana or Wyoming. And what you have here is basically, by the way of the appearance of the boy's father, a nonconformist. And he can be a nonconformist on the left or right. He certainly, to me, came across as a little bit in the hippie deal. And they're naturalists. If you look at her...
So you're saying he was kind of an odd duck, a hippie odd duck.
Well, he was typical of anybody who knows the social climate of Idaho, central Idaho and northern Idaho, where all these different people gather. And this very guy, it could be Pachenik may have something. This guy may have walked away. He might have been another Brad Tillman. He went over there and had some moral objections on what we were doing. Walked over to the other side, and he had come from from a family that let's say were progressives and thought outside the box, and that's the old man was trying to communicate with him the other day how proud he was that he held to his moral convictions. But it doesn't smell right. It's just part of a continual psyop, whether it's in Santa Barbara or Newtown or this deal. And it's obviously the first thing that hit me was the fact that it's a major distraction from the VA. We've got our own problems here in Wyoming, down at the base in Cheyenne, Fort Waring. And then the fact that they came from Idaho, and it's just very interesting, and it's just another psyop as far as I'm concerned.
All right, very interesting point. We're going to take one more call after break, and then or right now, and then come back from break with John Rappaport of NoMoreFakeNews.com, who's riding a shotgun with me here today. But Pat Tillman didn't like them growing opium and guarding it, and didn't like the fact they were doing photo ops and were working with some of the Al-Qaeda, Taliban, but not the others. And now all that's come out. So I don't want to put him in the same area as this guy. Pat Tillman was an amazing guy, making $5 million a year, turned it all loose because he thought America was under attack. And then he went over there and found out it was a bigger fraud and got upset. Totally different person than this guy. Let's talk to... Max in Idaho real quick says mother-in-law is friends with family, knows parents. Max, what's your take on all this briefly?
This isn't Max. This is his mother-in-law from Idaho.
Okay, it just says Max. Okay, fine, go ahead.
I know Bo's parents.
Okay, so what's your take on this then?
I really don't know. I know that they're wonderful people. I believe that Bo's father grew a beard and began to speak Arabic right after Bo was captured because I think there was nothing more than just he wanted to support.
So he was doing it through solidarity. Stay there, ma'am. Don't hang up. Well, what's your name, ma'am?
Susan.
Okay, Susan, stay there. And then we're going to get Rappaport going to ask you a question as well. And then that's it. I got to stop taking calls on this. Briefly here, going back to Susan, says she knows the family. Any other points you'd like to make on this whole situation with the so-called, prisoner of war release, Bo Bergdahl? Go ahead.
Well, my take on it, I've known the kid since he was a little boy. I've known Bob and Janie forever. My daughter went to school with Bo. He was just nothing more than I think that he just wandered off because I think he got over there and he was scared. He didn't want to be there. I think it was very innocent. I think he was brainwashed, as far as I'm concerned, because if you knew the valley that we were all raised in, it's a very simple valley, and there's nothing to be scared of, to be raised there. You're just raised, and the boys either go off to service or they go to college. And Bo decided to go to the service, and he got caught up in something that he wasn't prepared for. And I think it's nothing more or nothing less than that.
Ma'am, I'd like to put you on hold, and I believe you who you say you are, but check that as a journalist to make sure it's on record, and have you on the nightly news tonight to talk about the family, to talk about the town, and to reach out to the family. Because I'm saying he could have been a deep cover agent, could be a hero infiltrating, could be what Pachinik says, deserting and, off the reservation. Could have been grabbed. We don't know. It's just that I don't believe anything comes out of Obama's mouth, and I don't know why they'd bring all this out now. It's a very sophisticated question. I'd like to get the truth out. So if you can reach out to the family for us, I'd appreciate that. But I'm going to put you on hold, and if you do that, I'd like to get your name and number and see if we can have you, go public and document you are who you say you are, so that we can get you to come on the nightly news tonight. Okay? Thank you so much. Please don't hang up. So there you go, folks. We're just seeking the truth on this. With all the fake stuff we've seen put out, it just something isn't adding up. In closing on that subject, what do you make of what she just said, John Rappaport?
Well, it's quite possible, Alex, that, as she says, he got in over his head. Some propaganda, whatever. He decided, okay, this is what I want to do. And then all of a sudden, when he got over there, he realized the situation was quite different. But the last thing I would say is, you bet it's quite different over there. It's quite different than anybody thinks it is until later.
Let's come right back in 60 seconds. John Rappaport, I'm Alex Jones, Infowars.com. Follow us on Twitter, Real Alex Jones, backup, PrisonPlanet.com. Spread the word, folks. We are the resistance. You are the resistance. Worldwide resistance.